And let's stay with development surrounding whistleblowers. There's now a whistleblower house that has been launched. The organisation was founded by former Deputy Commissioner at the South African Revenue Service, Ivan Pillay, former CEO of Trillian Management Consulting, Bianca Goodson, as well as the Senior Manager of the Organisational Ethics at the Ethics Institute, Liezl Groenewald. It aims to protect whistleblowers as well as facilitate support services for whistleblowers. It also seeks to create awareness of their plight, given the public outcry to treat whistleblowers better. Let's speak to Cynthia Stimpel, a whistleblower, former group treasurer at SAA, as well as author of Hijackers, on board. Ms. Stimpel, thank you so much for your time this evening. What kind of support will be available for whistleblowers through this platform?
Thank you for having me. Yes, our intention as the Whistleblower House is to provide services that is very much needed for a whistleblower. So it will be that we will facilitate access to legal fraternity to help the whistleblowers. We're looking at psychological assistance for the whistleblower, as well as safety and security, financial, and any other need, as in safety for their families and that they may need a safe place to stay. So it's a holistic view we're looking at. Thank you.
And how are you going to be conducting these risk assessments? Because I'm sure they'll differ on a case-by-case basis.
Indeed. So we're working with an organisation who will assist us with the risk assessments. These will cover various issues surrounding this whistleblower. Not all whistleblowers may need the same help, and their case is all different. So it's going through the process of understanding what their case is, what the situation is, what the detriments they suffered and the plights, and then assessing it and then seeing what they need on a priority basis. And that's how we're going to facilitate helping them. Obviously, we don't have all those services in-house, and hence the reason why we are partnering with the service providers to help the whistleblower through that mechanism.
Now, when one looks at, for example, the Corruption Watch's, whistleblowers handbook, it talks about a positive whistleblowing culture, being critical as part of a success, for example, of any risk management system. Also saying that whistleblowing is an early warning system to avert possible risks to any organization. Now, despite this, one would look at this and say these are positives for an organization, but we still see them being labeled as troublemakers. Would you say that the system has failed so much that it has led to an organization like this one that you're now part of?
Exactly. And right now in our society, it is very difficult to speak out without being ostracized or victimized and retaliated against. So the key proponent here is that we advocate for whistleblowers, in that there is a whistleblowing culture within organizations, that it is safe to speak out for organizations, for the staff and the teams. And there are organizations like Institute of Directors and the Ethics Institute that are already working in this space to work together with organizations in their whistleblowing policies to ensure that people are not victimized when they speak out. We will obviously work similarly hand in hand with them, because our intention is to help the whistleblower before, if they haven't spoken out yet, before they speak out and get victimized, to put them through the process correctly regarding the Protected Disclosures Act and any other legislation that may be pertaining to the case. And even those who have spoken out before, how can we remedy the situation to some extent to minimize the impacts that they are suffering? But the key focus is that in the organizations themselves, there needs to be a culture where it's okay to speak up. Thanks.
And talking about that, because that's the next question I was going to ask you, that the conversation often centers around the whistleblowers themselves, the legal implications that they face, the loss of livelihoods that they also suffer, and the difficulties that they often are faced with should they decide to blow the whistle. But how do we begin to have a conversation with employers to ensure that they understand that this is important, because it's part of the Labour Relations Act, it's part of the Companies Act, it is part of all the legislation that governs the companies. How then do we begin to have a conversation in that regard that talks to the employers in this particular case and also hold those who are victimizing the whistleblowers accountable?
That's the challenge we currently face right now, and the difficulty. My recommendation would be, besides working on the culture, is ensuring that the space is safe to speak out, and then encouraging people to be able to speak up, because sometimes people observe wrong conduct or bad behavior and are afraid to do so for fear of victimization. The organization themselves have policies and code of conduct up on their walls and their screens stating, do speak up, we won't victimize you, but the opposite happens. And I think the advocating needs to happen all around. What we want to do also as whistleblowers will be part of the advocating, the advocacy, to say that if you want to stop corruption, you're going to allow people to speak up and have that courage. Create this, we call it courageous conversations, where you can talk about issues facing the organization in meetings or in quiet spaces, but it's safe, that we know the whistleblower will not be retaliated against.
And listening then to what you're saying, could we see a situation where in your organization you might be bringing these employers then to the table in order to have some of these conversations? Because as we speak, of course, you and I spoke at the back of the release of that State Capture Commission of Inquiry's report. There's been a subsequent part 2 and a part 3, which we're now still waiting for. There's that SIU report that points to quite a lot of irregularities when it comes to some of the tender processes as well. And there's also even some of, the corruption that we also see, irregular expenditure as well at municipal level. So definitely it does point to a need of a conversation with some of those that are making the decisions here around the table. Could we see something like that being explored by your organization?
Yes, definitely. Currently, we're already setting up future meetings to engage with various organizations in this regard. The NPA, the SIU, those are meetings we are going to be setting up. We're looking at setting up meetings with not only the SIU, but also companies like banks or bigger organizations where we've seen victimization, discussing and creating this attitude of openness, and and they're willing to change the trajectory of where we're going in South Africa regarding whistleblowers and obviously combating corruption.
All right, that's a very important conversation that really needs to be had. And you talk about the NPA there, coming out to just last week talking about how law enforcement is on its knees. And these, of course, are organizations that really need to be empowered. But thank you so much for that. We'll continue then to watch the work of your organization unfold. That was Cynthia Stimpel. She's a whistleblower, former group treasurer at SAA, as well as an author of Hijackers on Board.